The United Kingdom is appalled by the decision of Russia and China to veto this draft resolution aimed at bringing an end to the bloodshed in Syria.
Today was an opportunity lost. History will show us the price that the people in Syria and beyond will have to pay.
Today, July 19th, we now count 17,000 dead, men, women, children. We mourn their memory alongside the Syrian people.
If you take a look at what the US is doing, and this goes for Europe too, they were standing off. They claimed that they could not intervene in Syria because of the Russian veto. That has no credibility. If they wanted to intervene, they wouldn't care what the Security Council says. Evidence about that is overwhelming. They are internally quite happy about the veto because it's a pretext for not doing anything. So what they were doing is giving some support to the rebels, the rebel forces, obviously giving arms and other support to them, but not enough to make much of a difference. And the reason is that they don't like Assad, but they are even more worried about what is if Assad might fall. Assad is a brutal dictator. The US always supported quite happily brutal dictators in the past. So if you take the rhetoric aside and take a look at the historical record and the circumstances in Syria, you can see that there is a dilemma. Assad is not a favorite person, but he is much playing the Western game, not perfectly but pretty well playing the Western game, and whatever follows might be worse.
On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
Today I authorized 2 operations in Iraq. Targeted airstrikes to protect our American personnel, and a humanitarian effort to help save thousands of Iraqi civilians who are trapped on a mountain without food and water and facing almost certain death.
What was planned for Iraq initially is planned for Syria and Iran in a similar way. The first public statement by the Israeli ambassador to the US the day Iraq fell, that was published in the New York Times, was congratulating the United States and saying, "We have taken Baghdad, now let's go and finish the job forward to Damascus and Tehran." They saw it very clearly. Any independent regime that existed in the region, the time had come to get rid of them, one way or the other, and so the plan was set into motion from that time onwards. Then the Arab Spring erupted. They pretended to be for the Arab Spring and found it a good way to intervene in that way. In Egypt they tried to link up with the Muslim Brotherhood and they failed, and now they have a military dictatorship that they are trying to settle. When the uprising erupted in Syria, virtually everybody was supporting it. None of the public had an illusion about the Assad regime. Had they agreed with the opposition in the first 6 months, the situation would have been very different, but they made serious critical mistakes that transformed the peaceful protests to a full-scale civil war that opened the door to possible intervention. The intervention did not come directly from the West in this case. It came from Turkey, the eastern flank of NATO. Turkey appeared to supply rebel and terrorist groups, including the Islamic State, with weapons in an attempt to topple the Syrian regime. Saudi Arabia and Qatar are responsible and answer to Washington, even if they follow their own interests. These states intervene in the Syrian war in favor of the West and provoke the situation that exists today. The horror that is unleashed on the region by the Islamic State terrorists that conquered large areas both in Iraq and Syria. Certainly the way the British Empire ruled is divide and rule. Most of the countries where the British Empire was, when they left, those countries were divided. The United States as an empire usually works through putting in local collaborators who do the business for them and who can be defended when they have to be defended. In the case of Iraq, when they decided to occupy, it is now very obvious that the decision they took is to completely destroy every remnant of the former regime. The close links they have with the Israeli state means that the destruction of the Iraqi army was a promise that had been made. The Iraqi army was feared by the Israelis. It was the only strong force in the region. And this entire army had to be destroyed. The Sunni Shiite divide of the Arab world. This division of Sunni and Shiite begins in a systematic, organized way with the war in Iraq, because they link up with the Shiite clerical parties. You allow them to build their army, and units of the army brutally divide mixed sectarian districts. This led to the daily sectarian violence seen today.